All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Sabbath School lesson. This is going to be lesson number 13, Christ and the Crucible. Christ and the Crucible. Memory verse for this week is going to be taken from Matthew chapter 27, verse 46. And it says, "And about the ninth hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani?" That is to say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? From an early age, Jesus was actually persecuted. And this was even when he was first born. There were some wise men that came to visit him. And after their visit, basically King Herod, or Herod the Great, basically came after him trying to kill him. Herod actually killed every child that was like under the age of 2 years old. And basically because of this, Jesus ended up having to run off and escape down to the land of Egypt. So the point is, from an early age as a baby, he was being persecuted and facing rejection and persecution. As he got older, he consistently faced persecution and rejection. One of the things that you find in John chapter 1 and verse 46 is when Nathanael actually is being told that Jesus is the King of the Jews, the Messiah, by Philip, and maybe he should come see him. And Nathanael's response is very interesting. He says, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Now, one of the main things here is essentially that Nazareth was like the ghetto. So if you can imagine yourself going over to the hood, you wouldn't imagine that maybe a prophet may come out of the hood like that. So it's not necessarily the ideal feel. But in short, Jesus basically grew up in the hood. Now, one of the main key things about what Nathanael says about Jesus, can anything good come out of Nazareth, is that the Hebrew word for good is actually a representation of things that are of God. Basically, this goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, where you find that God is creating something and he's like, it's good. He creates something and it's good. He creates something and it's good. So basically, the Hebrew standard for what is good means that it's from God, or that it reflects the work of God. So what Nathanael is saying when he says, can anything good come out of Nazareth, is essentially he's saying, can anything that reflects God come out of Nazareth? It makes no type of sense to Nathanael. Can never even say this guy's name correctly. So the point is, basically what you have is a situation that Jesus is persecuted when he's a kid, but even as he's growing up and becoming an adult, people are still hesitant and kind of rejecting him based on where he came from. This continues on now into the second point, which is really the key, that Jesus faced major rejection. And this comes mainly out of what the author points out in Luke chapter 4, verse 21 through 30, and even kind of as you go on to the rest of Jesus' life. But Jesus is out there preaching, and he's trying to preach to his hometown, and his hometown grabs him and tries to throw him off a cliff. I mean, how would you like it if you preach your first sermon, you come back, and people say, so how did it go? Oh, it was actually pretty good. God blessed and everything, except for the fact that they wanted to throw me off a cliff, and I had to make a run for it. So essentially, this was Jesus. It's kind of actually funny, but that's terrible. Essentially, this is Jesus' life consistently as he goes on. So he's consistently facing crucibles and rejection as he continues to grow older. And one of the biggest keys is he faces that not only from his hometown, but even from his disciples in Gethsemane when they end up running away from him. And even in a little bit of extent when he was on the cross, where he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Feeling like even God had rejected him. So he felt like his hometown rejected him. He felt like his disciples rejected him. He felt like even God rejected him. So he was in this state of constant rejection. And one of the main things that you see here is that out of the crucible, the author kind of shows you in Matthew chapter 27 and verse 51 and 52, that there was a significant there were significant changes that took place when Jesus actually died. Specifically, graves even started coming open. Now, the individuals didn't resurrect at that time. They resurrected and walked out after Jesus resurrected, but also graves were open. There was also a curtain inside the sanctuary that was torn from top to bottom, symbolizing that the way to God had basically been open, and now mankind could actually interact with God, even as they interact with other individuals around One of the main things the author is really trying to get at with all of this type of stuff is really for you to actually kind of linger on this major point that when Christ overcomes crucibles, he sets people free. When Christ overcomes crucibles, he sets people free. And the main question also for you to kind of think about is, how is it that when you overcome crucibles with God, somehow God uses that to set others free? How is it that when you actually go through crucibles and overcome them, that God is using those to actually set others free? Many people are set free by the things that you end up overcoming in your own life. So how is God actually utilizing that? Now we'll move on to the profound meditation. One of the craziest things about this Sabbath school lesson that you really find about the crucible of Jesus is that ultimately it centers around Jesus being rejected. And it seems as if the ultimate crucible, you can say, is really Jesus being rejected. That's the crucible in his life. And one could argue that the biggest crucible that you might face in your life is being rejected by someone else. Being rejected by your family, your hometown, being rejected by your friends, or even feeling like you're rejected or abandoned by God. That's the biggest crucibles in some way, shape, or form that many people may actually end up facing. So there's an article out of Psychology Today, and it says that in 2001, the Surgeon General of the U.S. issued a report stating that rejection was a greater risk for adolescent violence than drugs, poverty, or gang membership. Basically, the more a person feels rejected, the higher the tendency they may have to anger or aggression. The more that a person feels rejected, the higher tendency that they may have to some sort of anger or aggression. In fact, they even trace this thing out to even school shootings. Rejection, not gang violence or any other thing like that, but actually feeling like a person has been rejected can actually cause people to kind of break out and do things that they would normally never do in their life. So here's the big question to you as we're kind of wrapping up this entire Sabbath school lesson and thinking about how this applies to ourselves. Just like Jesus, rejection may be the biggest crucible you may face because of the reaction it can cause out of you. So how has rejection affected you? How has rejection affected you? All of us have been affected by rejection in one way, shape, or form. So how has rejection affected you? I'm Oswald, and this is Profound Meditations Sabbath School Summary.